there are uh, certain things, parameters of a miniature war game that veteran gamers and game designers and people that have been into the hobby for many years recognize. And that is that depending on the detail that you want to have in the game, the length of the game can be increased. You may enjoy the details, but the time space uh, situation creeps in all the time. Size of the figures versus size of the gaming table versus size of the terrain. That always has an impact on how things are being done. An example of what I'm talking about is when you are reading history um, or listening, as I'm doing and have for a long time now, audiobooks. An example would be the constant um, reference that the authors are making to wavering of a Union or Confederate or French, British, whatever line of infantry. They wavered. They they were shocked. They staggered back. These kinds of terms are amorphous in a sense that we don't really understand what they mean because we haven't seen them for ourselves. And we only have the records of the people writing it down, sometimes months and months afterwards, or even years, about what it meant to have a line wavering, a group of men advancing and then stopping and then doing what? What does that mean? Well, it's not just what does it mean? What does the impact have on the game? That, in a sense, let me get right to the answer. That, in a sense, is a morale issue. Like a lot of this is. It's all about morale as opposed to how many casualties you're causing. How do the guys feel as they're approaching the cannons that are loaded with double canister? How do they feel about it? Well, they're intimidated in that example. They're scared, but they are determined to take those guns. They're going to go get those guns. Well, the double canister opens up and gaps appear in the enemy line, the target, because the double canister or canister, whatever, the artillery just blows holes in the line. And then the quote, we sealed up and kept going. We formed up and kept going. And then there's this other term. We fell back, regrouped, and charged again. And then we charged again. There's all this stuff. How do we show that in a miniature war game, a war game with historic miniatures? Well, the fact is you can't. You can't show it unless you're at that company level scale. In other words, the game table consists of actual 50 men figures on the game table. Our scale is a unit representing an entire regiment. Now, how do we show that kind of reality? Why? First of all, why do we want to show that? And you might say, well, it's the flavor. You know, it gives it the glorious thinking, feeling about what's going on. You know, it's that feeling. You want that, emotional impact to be coming across as opposed to just pushing men around a little game table. You want to have something more. And if you don't have those kinds of things represented, then it kind of loses something, or maybe it doesn't. But you still think about it. I've read about this, I read about that and how awful it was, but yet they kept coming, they regrouped and they fell back and then they came on again. So that kind of stuff. As I said, it's a morale issue. We, at least in Hex Command gunpowder, we have a system that when a target suffers 3 hits, it graduates the damage to the next level. For instance, if you have an incremental hit system as opposed to a full casualty hit, if you have an incremental hit, in other words, it's not really serious, but it's, over time, it's going to start to build up. For instance, incremental hits occur at a very long range because you're not going to get serious damage. You're going to cause little damage, and that's what it means, little damage, incremental. The closer you get, the more damage is going to be incurred on the target. And once you've got that 3rd incremental hit, it becomes a red casualty hit marked on the unit. You repeat the process until the unit has suffered its 3rd red casualty hit, whereupon it does what? It routes. That's the system we have now. In all Hex Command, mechanized, ancients, everything, it's the same way. 3rd thing graduates. So 3rd incremental hit causes a red hit. Getting a 3rd incremental hit again causes a red hit. Getting a 3rd incremental hit again causes a red hit and therefore has 3 red hits and the unit routes. Some units, depending on the order of battle for the scenario, may not. They may actually be able to take a 4th and a 5th, or maybe they'll take more incremental hits before a red casualty hit is caused. That kind of stuff, those kinds of varieties. The way that we can represent those waverings, those falling backs, and so on, is to simply say that when a unit has suffered its 2nd red hit, maybe it gets automatically pushed back 2 hexes, something like that. Well, then wait a minute. Does that mean it's not? Can it come back? Yeah, it's got damage, right? Or maybe that's too severe for them to fall back. They're falling back with pretty close to routing casualties. Well, maybe not. You don't know. Say they roll a dice to see if they fall back on the 1st red hit. An elite unit might roll the dice to see if it falls back on the 2nd red hit. Or a 3rd red hit. In other words, it may not route, it simply falls back. So, which is why on the roster card, or marking on the unit itself proper, you can show that you tick off the number of routes a unit has suffered. And in this case, you can call a route, not a route, a pushback. So the unit is pushed back. But as you record those pushbacks, we limit it to the 3rd pushback, and then it does actually route. I mean, it runs for, off the field. And you'd be lucky if you can rally it. Maybe you can, but the idea is it has taken enough, it's had enough for the day, and it's gone. So you can suffer 3 red hits and don't route. You push back. On the 2nd, you mark that down, by the way, on the card or on the unit with some indicator. The 2nd route, okay, 3rd red hit again, and it gets pushed back again. And on the 3rd route, it is actually routed. It's not recoverable. It doesn't come back. Perhaps an officer can recover it, but yeah, follow the process. Anyway, so that is what we're talking about. And as to the other details, well, you'll have to be creative if you want to do those kinds of details. And one of those details involves skirmishers. We have, of course, in our inventory, both in Napoleonics and American Civil War, skirmisher stands. Why? It's such a, by comparison, by size and acreage and time-space comparison, skirmishers are just, what do? Nothing. Well, they do something, right? They do have a value. They're both a screen and a way of finding out where the enemy is without committing yourself or your regiment to a full-on, go into that forest and see what's there. Well, no. Stand where you are, send the skirmishers in. Let's see what they find. That's the idea. So here in our scale, do we have skirmishers? Well, we've found that, sure, they're nice to have, and they're kind of fun in a sense. They have their own little, benefits and so on. But they also take time to do. Moving a skirmisher group is not really that important because you can basically guess, unfortunately. With the bird's eye view of us being in a UFO looking down on the battlefield, or a balloon, or however you want to say it, we're looking at the history in front of us being portrayed, and we wonder, did that regiment set out skirmishers? Well, what if it did? And they went into the forest. What did they find? Well, they came running back. Did they report they found anything? Maybe they found nothing. Well, that's kind of the same thing as if you just sent the regiment. So what's the point of the skirmishers? Well, the skirmishers just have like a little function of going out in front of the main body. They, in ancients, they throw some javelins. They cause a little, a ruckus. And the skirmishers with missiles, rifled muskets, or whatever muskets, etc., they do the same kind of thing. They go out there and they take a couple of shots, and they just kind of harass, like, mosquitoes. They linger. So if you want to use the skirmishers, they can be available. It's just like two figures on a round clear base. And do you have to worry about the skirmishers coming from a home unit? No. Just put them out there. Put them out there, and when they do their little thing and then they want to come back, bring them back, or just pick them up. And so that begs the question, well, then what's the point? If they don't really have that much value, right? If you're not going to send them back to the home unit, you're going to disperse them from the home unit. They're going to go out there, do their thing, and they're going to maybe stay there while you bring up the rest of your forces, et cetera, et cetera. But now you're going to bring the skirmishers back in. Why? Well, just pick them up. Just pick them up off the game table. As a matter of fact, why even bother sending them out? Just put them down where you want them. Just put the skirmishers where you want them. Right? They just magically appear. Well, say you're advancing onto the game table, like in our situation here. You're going to have guys advancing in various locations. Right now, we're going for kind of a random thing. From one corner to the other, we're going to randomize where the troops enter. Okay, so, you're going to be possibly 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the other side, we'll say that's the Confederate side, 1, 2, and 3. Random. Oh, actually, the corner might count. Cross country. Now, let's just say it could be the roads. Anyway. So your guys are coming on. Is there a skirmish line in front of them? Are they deployed? Hypothetically, we don't show that because we just have little blocks of men. It's a regiment. It's a unit. We don't show them in a line formation. We don't mount them that way because there's no point in doing that. So just like many other games, the little chit, right? The little cardboard chit is basically square, and it's in a hex. And in our case, it's a stand of infantry figures. They're not exactly, they're maybe put on the stand in a line formation, but it's basically kind of a square base. So, okay, it's a line. It's a line of infantry. And in front, all of a sudden, when they get to the end of their move, boom, here, just put down skirmishers. Or march the skirmishers on first, and then march on the rest of the unit. So in other words, you experiment and you'll find out. I have things floating around in here. When you play it, you find out. We have the rules. They're just basically harassment. They're harassing fire. They can only cause incremental hits when they're close enough. That's all they can do. They only cause and suffer incremental hits. You can't cause anything greater than an incremental hit to a skirmisher stand. So there you have it. That is the little bits of details in a historical war game with miniatures. Things that you can do without. Maybe you want to do without them because they're just, not that important to you. However, one might say, well, wait a minute, mounted Mongol archer skirmishers. Well, that's a different story, right? Mounted Mongol uh, archer skirmishers are a significant difference than foot, right? Marching, advancing guys with javelins and slings and etc. That's a little bit different. When you're on a horse, yeah, you're probably skirmishers, but you're moving pretty quick. And that is a significant uh, reality that could be on the table. And when we get to our Crusades thing, we'll demonstrate a lot of that stuff too. But that'll be sometime in the future. We're working on the Crusade stuff right now, and it'll take a while. But hopefully, we'll get those things demonstrated. Uh, if anybody's wondering, we have 3D printed little wheat chucks, wheat bundles, and that's what this is. Little visual. That's all it is. It's not a movement thing. It's just a visual of harvested wheat. And the reason we did that is because we were just listening the other day to the 7 Days battles outside Richmond, and there was an episode, I think, around Glendale before Malvern Hill, that field had recently been partially harvested wheat. So that's what we're showing. And why? Because let's put something interesting out there. Something. Try and pretty up the battlefield, make it a little less, digital. And you'll notice we haven't prettied up the creek yet either. We just left it off because it's just more stuff to put on the game table. By that I mean riverbank, bushes, rocks, and so on. So we leave that stuff off, and we get on with the demonstration, and there it is. We've printed up new fences, which is good. These fences are segmented like this. They're individual segments because we are planning on applying them to fabric so they can go up the slope of the hill. So we'll hot glue them to a strip of fabric, and that fence line will be able to go up the slope of a hill. That's the idea. And we've done that before, and it's been very successful. All right, so there we are, and we'll come back with more as we start putting troops down and so on. And there we are. Thank you.